Hi, welcome back to Rebel Movement Podcast. My name is Billy. My pronouns are they, them, or she, her, and I'm happy you're here. Um, but just keep on checking back. I also want to do a little thank you at the beginning here this week when I recorded. I think it will be last week when it comes out, when this episode is out. Shannon Crow of the Connected Yoga Teacher podcast posted one of my episodes on her podcast with permission, of course. It was a newsletter that she had sent me a message about saying that it should be a podcast episode and asked if it could be in her podcast. And I said yes. I was pretty honored that she asked in the first place. So it was, I think it's episode 87 on this podcast. My heart wasn't in it. And then hers, it's just come out April 1st. So if you want to go check that out, go ahead and do that. Super grateful to Shannon Crow just for existing and also for her support and for her work with, all of her work, but she's also doing quite a lot of work on staying informed and talking about what's happening in Palestine, which is something that's what the episode is about, kind of about staying informed with Palestine and having a hard time knowing what to say, and hard time coming up with content and stuff. So if you're feeling like that, go listen to the episode 87 on here or Shannon Crow's podcast episode. And I would say just give her a follow as well. Especially if you are a yoga teacher. She does a lot of stuff around helping support yoga teachers, but she also is doing a lot of stuff around staying informed with Palestine, which I think is really important. It's not something I've talked as much about on here. I do share a lot of things, like I would repost a lot of things on TikTok, and I share in my stories. I haven't as much the last couple of weeks, but I still have been, just not quite as much as I was a while ago, just because I have some of the stuff going on with me. I've had a little bit less space for everything else. It's those like weeks in your life where you're like, how was like a week gone by? Like it feels like I blinked. It's been like that with just a bunch of different chaos and a bunch of different things going on. Not all bad chaos, but anyway, so I'm trying my best to remember to share now. Whenever I post stuff on Facebook or Instagram, sorry, I try to go in and find stuff to share that way so that I'm sharing a little bit more. I have done a couple episodes on, now that I'm thinking about it, on how to start doing some of the work as well and how to start having conversations. So for episode 87 is My Heart Wasn't in It, which was the one that was talking about. Episode 83 is my interview with Shannon Crow, where we're talking about social justice and yoga. It's activism and yoga with Shannon Crow. And I've done other ones, but maybe I haven't. Oh, Speaking Up, there we go. Episode 87. Oh, that's with Megan Hamilton, but that one is a good one. And there's more. I can't find them now, though. Maybe I shouldn't have been trying to search for them while I'm actually recording an episode. That's probably the thing that's getting in my way. So, it's probably newsletters. Anyway, sorry you had to hear all that process. So the backstory before I get into today's topic and the story that's inspired it. If you don't already know, in November, December, I moved to Prince Edward County, which is technically it's an island on Lake Ontario. It's apparently, according to this Google search, 2 hours east of Toronto, for any of my friends who don't know Canadian geography, which is totally fair. And I was in Kingston before, which is even more east than here. It takes like an hour and a half to drive there from here. Kingston is a little bit closer to Ottawa than here. Well, I mean, at least Kingston's closer to Ottawa than I am right now. Does that make sense? Okay. So I moved here, and we were very, very lucky. My partner's parents live in Prince Edward County. Actually, his family grew up here. Both sides grew up here for last, I don't know, quite a few, I'll just say quite a few years, like their parents and I think their parents. So they're from here. My partner has a lot of family in the area. And we're really lucky that So his parents have a house that's a farmhouse, that's, like 100, years old or whatever. And they had renovated part of it, and they're generous enough to essentially make it into a duplex. Um, so and then we're going to be renting out from them. So we get to be a part of the building process and the planning process, and then don't have to have as much of the financial cost. Of course, some of the fixtures, like the upgrades, the cost of furniture in it, like all of that stuff is on us, of course, and we're doing our best to help out. And but we were really lucky that we get a opportunity to be able to basically build a house and plan a house without as much of the cost. Originally, we were thinking about doing a tiny house, which was, of course, a little bit more of a budget. Um, and then this opportunity came up, which is amazing. They have a big property, lots of outdoor space. Honestly, pretty fortunate. I don't know if I ever would have been able to afford to do this. I mean, down the road, I'm sure, but just with, current economy stuff, it was a dream that was far away, but it's actually happening now, which is really cool. And I don't know about you, but I grew up playing The Sims. So it's the planning part. It's a little bit more tricky than playing Sims. I'm not gonna lie to you. It's hard on your brain. It feels like a muscle you've never worked out before, but in your brain. At least that's how it felt for me, because I've never done anything like this before. So we were past the planning stage. Well, we still have some of the planning to do of the more details of like the cupboards and like what where the kitchen cupboards are going to go and those details and like what light fixtures and stuff. But we've like the main layout is done, and we've been working on it, and we're also really lucky that my partner's dad built houses or had various different jobs doing different parts of houses, but basically built houses for a living in his career, and he loves it. So he's done, I would say, like 99% of the work. We've helped out as much as we can. I would love to be able to help out more, but of course I'm running a business, and I work full time, and like work full time in my business, and everything else going on. He also has a full time job, and then there's also a million other things happening. But we have helped out. We're trying to help out more now that like part of it was that we were at a stage where it's an old house, so there's things you have to do like leveling the floor or leveling the walls that will be too complicated to be able to like his my partner's dad would have to teach us how to do it, and then it would just be more work, or it's like really tricky for more than one person to do because you're just leveling out something or whatever. So anyway, so far in this process, I've learned how to drywall. I know how to mud drywall. I know how to rip up a floor, which I don't know if that's necessarily a skill, but I'm calling it a skill because it was fun and hard. And I mean, we've done painting, which I don't know. I had done before, but not like this, because my stepkids got to decide what they did in their room for the walls, and one of them decided to do like an ombre, which is an interesting thing. It looks really cool. It was just an interesting process of like figuring out how to do it and learn how to do it and all that. And then the one has a really cool idea for stripes and stuff. So lots of cool, like different painting skills, if you know what I mean. Like different, not just like painting all one color. I'm actually also, now that we're talking about paint, this is not to do with the topic, but I'm going to tell you anyway. I'm so excited about the colors we're choosing for the house because it's small. It's going to be small, but we're picking like more bold colors, if you know what I mean. Like we're going to have some green in the bathroom. I mean, that doesn't sound bold when I say it like this. It's not going to sound bold to you because you can't see the color. Anyway, I guess you'll have to wait and see. I'm sure I'll post pictures on Instagram if you at Move with Billy. We're not near that painting, but that stage right now. But when we're closer to there, I will show you. So what inspired this whole episode today and a post I did today is what I learned to do yesterday. So yesterday we're doing a set of stairs that are more of like not a rough draft, but like a test set, because we're experimenting with a different style of stairs, which I've been told I think are called witches stairs or something like that, where it's essentially a staircase that's like suppressed into half the size. So you have If you imagine the treads lining up, if you're looking at them, if like you're going up the stairs, you draw a line down the middle, like tops to bottom stairs, and then you alternate them so that you have to step left foot and then you have to step right foot. Does that make sense? Um, we're experimenting with that style of stairs. Anyway, so my partner's dad had made the stairs. I have to make that clear. He made the stairs. Did not build them. I'm not that skilled yet. But what I got to do yesterday and learn how to do is extend the tread. You know what I mean? So the part you step on. I mean, you may maybe know this. I just don't want to assume. The part that you step on was when we first put it together was like a more like a ladder size, but we wanted it to be a bit longer, of course, because it's more stairs, not a ladder. So I got to use a circular saw, measure the space, use the circular saw, put the step in behind, make sure it's level, and then drill them in. And I mean, it sounds simple, but as someone who's never I've used a circular saw once before, in our process of doing all this, but I'm still fairly beginner at a lot of this. Like when I had done it before, I had help, like there was someone with me. This is the first time that it was, my partner's dad showed me how to do it, showed me how to do all the things, and then was there for a couple of times where there was like, difficult things came up, right? Like there's like this thing is in the way. How do I do this part? Does that make sense? Like more difficult parts of the process came up. But then after that, over the most of the time, I was doing it by myself, which is really cool. And I was really like, I find with this kind of thing, this has happened because some of the last times I've had to do this kind of thing is I'm really nervous, but not in a way that I'm kind of nervous to start. And then I keep being nervous that I'm doing something wrong or like I'm not doing it right. So I have noticed I need a little bit of like almost validation of this thing of like, does this look right? Am I messing this up? So it's gotten me thinking about being a beginner at things, and because it's been a little bit since I was a beginner at something like this. This is like so different from most other things I've done in my life. Like when I was little, like 10, I tried to do a little bit of like woodworking things. I mean, that was like a long time ago. So it's been a while since I've been a really new person at something like this, where it's not like I'm not just trying it out for like 10 seconds, whatever. Like I've done some new things. Does this make sense? Like I've tried needlepoint and I'm that kind of thing, but this is the first thing where it's like, I don't know, like a new skill of this sort. I don't know how to really explain it. Anyway, that part's not as important. But it's just gotten me thinking about beginner stuff, because when I first started to practice yoga and practice workouts, working out and mobility and stuff, I had a very similar process of like, am I doing this right? I feel really nervous, especially if it was a class. Like if I was going into a class, I felt really nervous to go. And then I felt also really nervous to go and be a beginner. Like, oh, people are going to look at me and know I know that I don't know what I'm doing, and that's embarrassing, or something like that. Or just feeling like I needed to look around for more like external validation that I was doing something right. Similar style when I first started to teach, I was really nervous. I would like shake like a leaf, especially when I was about to open the door, and felt like, oh, I'm going to mess this up. I'm going to mess this up. And when I first started playing music and writing music, same thing. When I first started playing shows, although those I'm still nervous for. But those nerves are something that comes with being, I've noticed a pattern of when I'm new at something, I get nervous about something new because it's something I don't know. Obviously, I don't know if it's like a group class. I don't know the circumstances. What's like the vibe of the room going to be like? What are the people going to be like? What if I'm asked to do something really, acrobatic and I can't do that because how do I know if this yoga studio is going to be one where I'm allowed to sit out? Because there's been times I've been at studios where I wasn't allowed to, you weren't allowed to leave the room or whatever, or sit out, and I've taught in unfortunately, in studios in the past where students weren't allowed to leave the room, kind of thing, which I disagree with. I just got to say that right now. But and then feeling that feeling of needing a little bit more external validation, which in some cases, like, if I'm putting tread on stairs, yes, okay, someone else should double check that, because if I'm doing it wrong, it's not going to be safe and maybe it'll look weird, right? But in something like, and I guess similar, like if you're doing yoga or working out or whatever, you might want someone to make sure that the way in which you're moving is safe and you're not going to hurt yourself, but it's not really necessarily the same, although it does feel similar. So I wanted to talk about being a beginner in yoga and being at yoga and movement classes in general, because I, as you've just found out, I'm an anxious person. I overthink about a lot of things. I get really nervous for new things. If I'm meeting a new person, if I have a meeting, there's been quite a few times in the last couple of months where I've had a meeting with someone and I was really nervous about it, and then most of the time, it ends up going way better than I think. And I had a lot of social anxiety growing up. I still do to some extent, depending on the circumstances. So when I first started to create my business, one of the things I and actually when I was teaching even before that, some of the things I tried to keep in mind was other folks who might also be nervous to either try something new or to be in conversations with new people or whatever. So it looked a little bit different then because I was teaching in person and it wasn't my studio. And now I do teach in person sometimes, but we'll talk about specifically online. It's a different approach. You know what I mean? It's a different style. And I do include some social time in the classes. And I wanted to be really aware and cognizant that there are people who are going to join who might feel like I might have felt and be really nervous and I'm not sure how it's going to look. And maybe they don't want to participate in the social stuff, or that, I don't want it to be like a place where you show up and you're just like super awkward and uncomfortable to be there, or feeling just unsafe, a place that makes you feel more anxious. So I tried really hard to make sure that I try really hard in general still to make sure that it's a space that feels safe. So I'm the one that will be like guiding the conversation unless conversations that happen naturally. Usually I will ask if you've never met other people in your group before, I will just ask name and pronouns. If you feel like sharing it, you can always type it in, but and if you don't feel like sharing pronouns, you can also let me know ahead of time too. And then I'll usually ask, if you feel like sharing, I'll ask for a win for your week, or I'll just like, how has your week been? I really like doing wins because it starts to, I've noticed, if you do it, every week or so, it starts to sort of, I find people start to notice a little bit more of their wins, like things that they've done that they're proud of, or good things that have happened, which I'm not to say that like the things that are hard in your week are not valid, but it's just really nice way to connect. And I find that people start to celebrate each other's wins, which is one of the cutest things in the world, I think. And that's it. But there's always the option to not share. So that was a small little detour, but it is part of the conversation we're having, that I'm a person who has anxiety around new things. And I understand that, especially when it comes to movement classes, like we'll talk about the actual movement side of things, it can be kind of vulnerable, because how do you know, like, what is the class going to look like? What are you going to be asked to do? What if you don't know how something works? What if the teacher says something that's like diet culture and you're not here for that? Maybe you're in recovery for an eating disorder or from being in diet culture, and like, how do you know what's going to happen? And maybe that'll be really triggering. Or what if you are in middle class and you have to pee? Like, what do you do then? Or what if you don't know what you're doing? It's terrifying. I get that. I totally understand that. I've been in that position. And I still feel like that sometimes. Even as someone who teaches, I still get nervous to try new studios because I'm like, oh, how is this going to go? What's the vibe going to be like? What's the, now I have a slightly different perspective, is that I've had some pretty toxic situations with other teachers and studios, and I don't really want to be in the similar place again. Like, I don't want to be harmed in any way. You know what I mean? Just as you don't. And I don't really know if there's a way for you to like look at the studio and know for sure that they're not going to be shitty and toxic. To be honest, I don't know other than trying it. But it's vulnerable because that's not even all the things. Like, then when if you've never done the movement before, you've never ever done yoga, and someone asks you to do a yoga posture, if they say just the posture name, you're going to be like, what does that mean? And sometimes maybe you're not as aware of what's happening in your body. And if someone says, listen to your body, you're like, what does that even mean? Which I've talked about a little bit in my blog. If you go on my Facebook, or not my Facebook page, my website, there should be a more recent blog about how to listen, like what that means. But there's all sorts of things. And the thing that I think comes up, that I've seen as a teacher, the thing that comes up the most is this feeling of, am I doing this right? What if I'm doing this wrong? People who have said they need like more straight answers, yes or no. Yes, you're doing this right. No, you're not doing this right. And here's something that I think, I don't know if this will be helpful, but I think it's important, is that in movement, generally speaking, the most important thing is how it's feeling in your body, which, if you don't know what that means, I get that. Maybe you're like, okay, that's the least helpful thing you could say. What I mean by that is, if you're feeling pinching and pain, stop doing it. If it feels really uncomfortable, not in an uncomfortable like you're using your muscles way, but uncomfortable like this feels like something feels wrong in my body, come out of it. If you're not sure, ask. If you're not sure if something's right, ask. But and I mean, the teacher, I'll just speak of my classes, not because I'm trying to be like, you have to take my classes only, but just because it's a little bit easier to give you a more concrete example. So in my classes, if let's just say, for this example, we'll do it online. If I'm teaching online, I do all the practice poses with you, and if I can't do them all, I will let you know, but I will still do my best to explain. And if you've never been to class before, I will, if I'm not able to demo the whole thing, I will at least show you the postures so that you know. But I do my very best to explain things in a way that hopefully will make sense, and then show you when I can show you. And at the very beginning of practice, every time, I remind you that if you come to class and you want to lay down beginning to end, that's great. If you want to do some of the things and then lay down, great. If you want to come to practice and end up doing some of your own thing, also great. All of those things are safe, and they're fine, and they're encouraged. And I remind you every time that you can do it. And I also, for online classes, you can have camera on or off. Folks usually have sound off because I record. And then it's just, they feel a little bit better knowing that, none of their sounds or their video will be in the recording. But I feel like online classes are really helpful for this kind of situation. If you are a person that has a lot of anxiety, because it's in your space, it's a space that you get to design. You can make it as cozy as you want to, blankets, and if you like candles or tea or snacks or whatever your heart desires. And if you want to just end up just like laying down the whole time, then that's great. Or if you start practice and you're like, actually, I want to do this movement, then you can do that movement. In terms of in person, but also online, let's see. I'll just say in person for now. So in person, if you were new to class with me, and say there's a pose that I can see in your face you're feeling a little like unsure about, I usually Um, how do I even explain this? So I usually will not give you any corrections or I used to do hands-on. I'm not entirely sure about my feelings about it right now, to be honest with you. I probably wouldn't give hands-on right now, but unless I mean that's a different conversation. So we'll just say I'm not going to do hands-on, but usually won't give big corrections on the first practice unless you look at me or you like either wave me over or you look really confused. And if it's like there's like a consensual thing, like you are consenting or asking for inviting help in. Part of this is because in some cases we've just met and I don't know your body. You will always know your body better than I do. I don't know your experience in the posture. And there's no way that I could ever assume what's happening in your body. Um, I might, if you're looking confused and you kind of look at me like, oh, is this right? I might like, give a little nod or like, gesture or maybe come over and talk if that feels comfortable. I will help if you are wanting help, but I'm not going to assume you want help because I'm not going to assume that you're doing something that feels wrong. Does that make sense? But if you're like visibly confused and you're like inviting in help, I will help you. Because I really think one of my goals as a teacher is to help you advocate for your own experience and advocate for your own body. And there's another word there that I wish I could remember, but I can't. I am not a teacher that is ever going to tell you how your body should look or shouldn't look and how something should feel and shouldn't feel. I might say you might feel this in these muscles because those are the muscles that are being stretched or being used. Um, but then that's not always a universal experience. I'm never going to tell you, oh, this posture is the best posture in the world and you'll find it really relaxing because not everyone is going to feel that. Usually, if you come back to practice with me, say a couple, the next time or whatever, then if there is something that looks really wrong, I'm just saying that because that's what other people have said. I don't think of it that way. If something looks off, I might just come over and say, how does it feel? And I mean, that's more often the case that people ask anyway. I'm getting too caught up in the details of the actual interaction. Let's just talk. I'm going to focus on the experience. If you've asked for my help in a posture, you're like, am I doing this right? And the alignment visibly seems like there's nothing that's like, oh, your arms are, supposed to be your hands are supposed to be a little further out so that you have space for your shoulders, whatever. Even if that's the case, I'm not going to come over and just start to immediately correct you. I'm going to come over and say, how does this feel in your body? Or maybe if it's to do with shoulders, like, how does that feel in your shoulders? And it's fine if you don't know. You might like, I have no idea. It feels fine. Cool. What happens if you move your hands a little further apart? Then how does that feel? I don't know. It feels fine. Or maybe you're like, oh, actually, that gives me a little bit more space in my shoulders. Or that feels way better. I'm going to always guide you based on how it feels for you and your experience in it. And when it comes to one-on-one, that's where you have a lot of chance to, if you're like, okay, these 4 postures, I don't love, I don't like them. They feel uncomfortable and I'm always worried if I'm doing it wrong. One-on-one is a place where there is that like there's the consent for there to be like a deep dive into the posture. There's a space for me to actually get to know maybe your injury histories, get to know some mobility things in your body. And I can know like, okay, you've had, or you're like, oh, I had knee surgery and this posture feels weird. And there's just more opportunity for a conversation about the postures rather than it being me telling you how the posture should be. So it's kind of a thing where anyway, this isn't this is not the whole purpose of me doing this podcast episode, but I guess it is a part of it, like knowing how I operate, and how I feel about things. But what I'm trying to say with all of this is it's really fine. It's fine if you don't know what you're doing because you don't have to know. You don't have to know. You don't have to be an expert. That's not why you're here. If you're a beginner, be a beginner and just do your best. If there is something that I see something that someone might injure themselves, I will come over and talk to you, or I will talk to you about it. And I'm still gonna not be like, hey, you're doing this wrong. And I'd be like, how does this feel for you? You know what I mean? It's not gonna be something I'm like, I'm ever getting you in trouble. And in online classes, I probably most of the time can't see you because the cameras are off. Um, but I always have space before and after practice to ask questions too. If you're like, oh, I don't understand this posture, I don't understand what's happening here, then you can always ask me. And um, yeah, I just feel like we get so caught up in being a beginner. Like when we're a beginner, we get so caught up in whether or not we're doing something right that it kind of can take over a little bit. It can make the whole experience about whether or not you're doing it right rather than the learning experience. And I understand that as I said, I get caught up in that too. I get caught up in the external validation and the that question of am I doing this wrong? Am I totally messing this up? And I think that movement anyway, unlike building stairs or helping build stairs, movement gives us an opportunity to practice internal validation. And the way to do that, as I very lengthily and hopefully not confusingly said, it's a good practice for practicing internal validation. It's a good space for practicing internal validation. And you do that by, as I said, hey, look at that. It was on theme. Wow. Here I was thinking I messed this all up. Oh, that's funny. It's on theme. I was actually literally just thinking, oh, I messed this up. Maybe I shouldn't release this episode. But it all connected back. So movement practices give us a space to practice internal validation or checking in with how it feels for us. Because we can trust, hopefully, if you have a safe space, that if we're doing something that looks like it's going to actually harm us, we will be told. And we have a safe space where we can ask questions that if we're really stuck on something, we're really not sure, we can ask without judgment. Because I think that's really important too. Ask without judgment, ask without the person making us feel like we're stupid or like we've messed it all up. And when we know that those things are options, right? You know that you can ask questions, and you know that if you need help, you will get it. And if it looks like you're doing something that might cause harm, you will be told. Or you'll be invited into a conversation, not told out, like told on or whatever. Then you can practice learning how to check in. If you're not in a space where you're constantly being told, this is how you have to feel, this is how you have to look, it gives you the space to check in with how does this feel for me? Like how do my hips feel in this posture? Where do I feel this? Like what muscles do I feel right now? Is it like maybe it's not the muscle doing most of the work. Maybe it's actually a smaller muscle that's helping out. Cool. Maybe you don't actually feel the stretch in the fronts of your thighs. Maybe you feel it in your belly. All experiences in these postures are totally valid because our bodies are complicated, connected things. Everything's connected. But if you're in a space that you never are given the opportunity to check in with how your feelings, you'll never know them. You know what I mean? You'll never know how the posture feels unless you're asked to feel it or unless you have the space to feel it. And one of the lovely things about being a beginner is that you have so much space to observe these things. If you've been practicing something for a long time, it takes a little bit more effort to do some of these things sometimes. Because we might for example, in final resting pose, I tend to set up almost the exact same way each time. And that was the way that I was taught however long ago. But if I try to take the beginner mind of like, how does this actually feel in my body? What is my actual experience in this body, in this position? Is this the place that feels the most comfortable? Maybe I have pinching in my low back. and then maybe I bend my knees. If you invite beginner mind into something, it's you learn a lot more from it. So being a beginner, we like people who've been doing the practice longer should be learning from you. You know what I mean? Like we're not going to teach you're not going to teach us the class. Like don't panic. That's not what I mean. But beginner mind is like being a beginner of something and having that mindset of like not knowing what's happening and not knowing where things are supposed to go gives you a lot of opportunity to check in with how things really feel and like what would feel good. Does this feel bad? Does it feel like you're feeling the muscles? um I hope this was really helpful. I hope this was helpful anyway. I feel like I have so many more things I could add to this. And I mean, maybe I will. I'll already have to edit this episode. It's definitely not as linear as I was thinking it was going to be. I wrote this as a caption, like not this whole thing, but I wrote a little caption about this earlier. And it was not this. It was not quite, it was more eloquently written than this. But anyway, thank you for listening. If you have any questions, feedback, or concerns, anything like that, send me an email, info@movewithbilly.com. If you subscribe to my newsletter in the link below, you get lots of freebies. And please take a moment, rate, review, subscribe, share this episode with anyone who you think might need to hear it. And I hope you have a fantastic day. Bye.